Okay. It's time for your bedtime story, and once again, we are being visited by dogs, by a dog attack. Come on, you want to come up, Percy? You want to come up? Okay. Oh, I'm trying to grab you. All right. So we have all the dog family here right now visiting us. I know. Yeah. It's a little much, isn't it? Huh. It's a little much. It's a little much. There's not enough room on my lap for everybody. Come here. Oh, my goodness. I know, Percy. I know. I know. You just get jealous. You want to say hi to everybody too, huh? You do. You do. All right. So this is Winston and this is Percy. I would love to start reading. Can you guys let me read? Can you let me read? Oh, my goodness. Okay. They're just going to clean each other. Okay. All right. Everybody's going to have to get off so that I can read. Okay. Here we go. So, we left them. They were struggling through the Wasatch Mountains, which is they're really a really difficult mountain range to get through when you're driving a covered wagon. Let's see. Here we go. The canyon they followed wound around among the hills. Every step of the way, heavy underbrush had to be cut and used as a roadbed. They toiled on, hacking their way through the woods and filling the ravines until they had reached the end of the canyon. There it looked as if they were trapped unless they abandoned their wagons. "You'll never get that palace car up," John Snyder said to Milt Elliott. "You want to bet on it?" Milt retorted angrily. Virginia wondered afterwards if perhaps Milt envied John's popularity with the girls. The two were always getting into arguments over the management of their oxen. Milt felt that they would get more work out of their animals if they treated them kindly. But John was in the habit of beating them to make them go. Teaming up, finally they pulled the wagons one by one up and over the last ridge of the terrible Wasatch Mountains. "We made it," Milt said triumphantly when they had reached the top. "Yes, but we did it my way," Snyder reminded him, "by beating the blasted oxen to make them pull." Both men were tired and angry at the road and at each other. Now they had more than a glimpse of the Great Salt Lake and the surrounding plains. Some in the company were so thankful for their deliverance from the terrible struggle across the mountains that they knelt right where they were and said a prayer of thanks. Mr. Breen's prayer was so beautiful that it brought tears to Virginia's eyes. After a few more days of road making, the wagons came down at last into a fertile plain. So they have gone up over the Wasatch Mountains, and now they're getting into an area that's a part of Utah that actually does have lots of grass and water. And it's kind of a valley. And then as soon as they're done getting out of that valley, they're going to hit the Great Salt Desert. And then they're not going to have any water, and it's going to be really difficult for them. The river at the foot of the mountain range was forded. Suddenly a joyful shout rang through the air. "There's Hastings' wheel tracks!" The Graves wagon was ahead. John Snyder was the first to see them. The other teamsters noticed that they were leading to the west in almost a straight line. The good news was passed down the line of wagons. Children cheered. Boys and men tossed their caps in the air. Again they were following Hastings, and everyone seemed glad. Behind them was the road the Mormons would later take across the mountains, giving them little credit for their struggle. Ahead was open country that looked good to Virginia after a month of bumping and jolting through the woods. Without taking a single day to rest, either themselves or their animals, the men pushed on. "We'll make up the time we lost," they told each other. It was easy going for the oxen the first day on the plain. They made better time than they had in 10 days of road making. A mountain close to the Great Salt Lake slowed them up a little the next day. An axle broke on one of the reed wagons. The Donners, too, had halted. What was wrong? That evening saw a second funeral. Poor Luke Halloran had died of the sickness he had been suffering ever since the Donners took him in at Fort Bridger. They buried him near the Black Rock by the shore of the Great Salt Lake. The children were more impressed by the strangeness of the country than by the simple funeral service for this sick man that they hardly knew. A surprise was in store for the Donners when they opened the trunk that he had given them just before he died. "Do you know," Elitha said in a whisper, "Mother found $1,500 and some emblems to show that he was a master mason." "Masons are good men, aren't they?" Patty asked. "Of course they are," Virginia replied. "Papa is a master mason." Anything their father did was right in the eyes of the Reed children. He was their hero, and nothing could shake their faith in him. As they traveled on, he pointed out many natural wonders for them to marvel at. The shore of a vanished lake curved around the salt marshes and became their road. Finally, after passing more saltwater pools, they came to the wonder of wonders, 20 wells. "They're like those poison hot springs, only the water is fresh and cold," Virginia exclaimed. "It's magic," Jimmy cried out as all the children watched it being dipped up by the bucketful to be carried across the desert. "Look at the wells fill up again. Where does it come from?" Patty asked. Nobody could tell her. The water in the mysterious wells was so clear it reflected Virginia's face almost as if she were looking in a mirror. "Why is it so clear?" she asked Milt. "I never saw anything like it." "It must be deep," he replied. "Careful there, Tommy. Don't any of you children lean over too far. You might fall in." The men dropped a rope with a weight on the end of it, and they found that some of the wells were more than 25 feet deep. They were fed by an underground river. The ground was hard and dry right up to the edge of the wells. There were at least 20 of them. They kept discovering new ones as the wagons went on. All the next day the emigrants traveled through a grassy plain watered by the strange wells. Beyond them, curious rocks were piled up that looked like fairy castles. More of nature's tricks. You never know what to expect. "And look there," exclaimed George Donner. "Is this intended for a sign?" The wagons were halted as everyone examined what looked like a signboard. It had fallen over and was now partly buried in the sand. The paper attached to it had been picked to pieces. "I don't expect we'll ever know what it said," Milt commented, shaking his head. Virginia was curious. She and Patty were playing with the Donner girls. They heard George Donner when he shouted, "It looks like Hastings' handwriting." "We have to find out, Tamsin." His wife and a whole troop of children hurried over to see what was wanted. They stood for a moment, staring at the sign. "What a shame," several voices said. "Probably the birds did it. I think I can piece it together with a little help." "We'll help you, Aunt Tam," cried Mary Donner, bringing her a bit of paper. More pieces were found by Virginia, Patty, and the Donner children. Little Eliza Donner, only 3 years old, discovered a bit of paper and placed it in her mother's lap. None of the children ever forgot how Tamsin Donner sat there patiently piecing the scraps together until the whole message could be read. So this is a picture of what that looks like. So she's got the pieces of paper and she's sort of sticking them down so that they can figure out what the message is. 2 days, 2 nights, hard driving, cross desert, to next water. They had reached the dry drive. That must be what the sign was meant to tell them. 2 days of hard driving would take them 35 or 40 miles, but they must drive at night too. The distance across the desert must be greater than Mr. Hastings had led them to believe. "What's he getting at, anyway? Is he trying to deceive us?" the men grumbled. "We can't drive day and night. We'll kill the oxen. They aren't camels," Milt complained. "That's what Hastings says, day and night." John Snyder pointed out, "I don't know about the rest of you, but I'm not stopping until we get across." So they have now reached the Great Salt Desert. So right at the northern part of Utah, there was a giant prehistoric lake, and it was a saltwater lake. It was called Lake Bonneville. And slowly over the years, the water evaporated out of the lake until it became just a desert made out of salt. And so if you're traveling on that salt desert in the daytime, the heat is going to be reflected off the salt, and it's going to be really, really toasty hot. And this is now, they're in early September, right? When they're crossing, late August, early September. And so it's going to be really hot. So the smart thing would be to sleep in the daytime and then to travel across the desert at night when it's cooler. And in the salt desert, the temperature is really going to drop quite a bit, and it's going to be pretty cold at night. And that might actually be a good thing for when they're traveling, when they're walking, and way better than traveling in the daytime when it's just scorching hot. They just kind of weren't really thinking though. And so they're going to try to do a little bit of traveling in the daytime, and it's going to be really hot for them. All right, we're going to stop right there. They're starting one of the worst parts of their trip when they're crossing the salt desert. So on that note, I hope you have a good night's sleep. Be grateful that you don't have to cross the salt desert. And if you do, you can probably do it in a car across Highway 80, which is a lovely paved road. All right, I will see you later.